Hi guys, my name is Adolphus Ames and welcome to Terror Reimagined, where we re-envision classic, underrated, and flawed horror films with a different cast, alternate plot points, and themes. In this episode, we're going to reimagine Jaws. Jaws is based on the 1974 novel of the same name by American author Peter Benchley. The novel was the offspring of Benchley's fascination with sharks, an interest he picked up while spending his childhood summers on Nantucket Island in the 1940s and 50s. Back then, the waters around the island were rich in wildlife, including many species of sharks. When fishing with his father and brother, Benchley would often see their dorsal and tail fins crisscrossing in the water. To him, the image symbolized the unknown and the mysterious, the invisible danger of what lies below the ocean. By his early 20s, he began devouring any shark-related literature he could get his hands on. In 1964, he came across an article in a newspaper about New York fisherman Frank Mundus, who harpooned a 4,500-pound great white shark off the coast of Long Island. In 1971, Benchley saw a documentary titled Blue Water, White Death. It covers an expedition led by filmmaker and photojournalist Peter Gimble to capture a great white shark on film for the first time. That same year, he read a book about the expedition by Peter Matheson titled Blue Meridian. Both of those incidents sparked Benchley's imagination. He wondered what would happen if one of those sharks came into a resort community and wouldn't go away. Soon, Benchley started writing. His characters took on a life of their own, and before he knew it, the story had practically written itself. Jaws hit bookshelves in February 1974, and by then the manuscript had already been making its rounds through Hollywood. Producers Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown of Universal Pictures were the first to purchase the film rights, and soon after, 27-year-old Steven Spielberg signed on as director. After a long and strenuous production, Spielberg's adaptation was released in the summer of 1975 and became an instant pop culture phenomenon. During its original theatrical run, Jaws grossed $260 million domestically, becoming the highest-grossing film of all time until Star Wars knocked it off its throne 2 years later. It spawned a host of rip-offs focused on killer animals, and its success allowed it to become the prototype for a new business model that would dominate Hollywood over the next few decades. Blockbusters with a high-concept premise and a lot of market potential. I'm sure most of you are wondering why I would reimagine this beloved classic. Because I'm a writer, that's why. I love storytelling, and every storyteller has a different imagination. If you give one log line to a million different screenwriters, you get a million different scripts. I would reimagine Jaws as a darker horror tale with morally gray characters and a focus on the themes of obsession and man imposing its will on nature. First, I give this film a little bit more star power. Fresh off his leading role in Chinatown, I'd cast Jack Nicholson as Chief Brody. Hooper wouldn't be the lovable nerd Richard Dreyfuss brought to the big screen. In my film, he'd be closer to Hooper in the novel, a slightly snobby urban professional portrayed by Robert Redford. Quint would still be played by Robert Shaw, and Ellen Brody, that role would go to a young upcoming Farrah Fawcett. The movie would open at night on a young couple hanging out together at sea, Chrissy and Tom. They're enjoying the moment, cuddling, flirting, looking up at the stars together, and then the shark comes and rams the boat. Tom falls into the water. Chrissy is left groggy and confused. She gets back up and notices a dorsal fin moving towards them. She tells Tom to swim fast and get back to the boat. He tries his best but doesn't make it in time. The shark devours him right before Chrissy's eyes. Then he rams the boat again, knocking Chrissy into the water. She too is eaten. The next morning we meet Chief Brody. He wakes up, gets a call about a body on the beach, and leaves to check it out. Ellen isn't too happy about it. Lately, Brody has been prioritizing his work over his family. On his way out, Brody ignores his kids and rejects his wife's goodbye kiss. At the beach, he discovers Chrissy's body washed ashore and gathers enough evidence to label it a shark attack. He wants to close down the beach. Mayor Vaughn and town officials don't want to. 4th of July is approaching, and Amity Island is a town that relies heavily on the income from summer tourism. They convince Brody to sweep it under the rug and reassign Chrissy's cause of death. Sometime later, the beach is loaded. Brody sits near the shore watching his surroundings anxiously. It's killing him inside that the beach is open and dozens of people have no clue they are in mortal danger. That is until the shark appears and kills an elderly man. This leads Amity Island to hold a town meeting. Brody is dead set on closing the beach and so are a few other local residents. Mayor Vaughn isn't quite on board yet. This is where Robert Shaw makes his legendary entrance as Quint. He offers to capture the shark in exchange for $10,000. He also wants to do the job by himself. Vaughn shoots down Quint's offer and opts to put a much cheaper bounty of $3,000 on the shark's head. Dozens of local fishermen begin competing to catch the shark, including the boisterous Ben Gardner. Most of them turn up empty-handed. A few others narrowly escape becoming the shark's next victim. Matt Hooper is called in from the nearby Oceanographic Institute to help with his expertise. He goes to the morgue with Brody and examines the victim's bite marks. He concludes they are most likely looking for a great white. Brody invites him over for dinner that same night to discuss more about the shark. Hooper and Ellen are instantly attracted to each other. Ellen admires his youth, intellect, and city slicker charm, and Hooper admires her maturity. Throughout dinner, the two subtly exchange flirty remarks and glances. Brody isn't completely oblivious. The way his wife is looking at Hooper is the same way she looked at him when they first met. Dinner is suddenly interrupted by a phone call. Ben Gardner has been missing for a few hours. Brody and Hooper leave to join the search team. As they scan the water, Hooper asks a few questions about Ellen to pass the time. Brody quickly changes the subject. They come across Ben's abandoned boat. Hooper gets in the water to check the hull, and beneath the surface he finds Ben's dead body and a shark tooth. The next morning, the mayor stages a fake press conference to convince the public the beach is safe. He claims a local fisherman caught a tiger shark not too far off the coast hours earlier. He gives the bounty money to the fisherman and shares a few words of condolences for the families of the victims. Brody and Hooper are disappointed. They pull Vaughn aside and beg him to be honest and close the beach, but he refuses. "I can't have a panic on my hands for the 4th of July," he says. Later, Hooper is out exploring the town. He bumps into Ellen on the street. They chat for a bit and grab lunch together. She asks him what it's like to be an oceanographer and questions him about city life. Hooper asks her if she's unhappy living in Amity. She admits she hates small town life and confesses she's unhappy with her marriage as well. After lunch, they sneak off to Hooper's motel room and sleep together. The 4th of July has arrived. The beach is packed. Brody and Hooper are on high alert. They're trying hard to be stoic, but their instincts tell them something bad is about to happen. And indeed it does. The shark appears once again and this time takes out a kid, Alex Kittner. The mayor is distraught. His reputation is ruined and he's most likely going to have to resign from office. Quint shows up and taunts him. "Still think my price is too high?" In a last act of desperation, he hires Quint to take out the shark. Brody convinces Quint to let him and Hooper join him on the hunt. He is reluctant at first, but eventually gives in. Brody drops by Hooper's motel room to share the news. The blinds are slightly cracked. He sees Ellen and Hooper together through the window. Brody is furious, but he decides not to make a scene. He goes home instead and pretends he never saw anything. That night, Brody doesn't talk much. When Ellen talks to him, he gives her short, cold responses. He makes a phone call to Hooper and tells him they are joining Quint at sea. Ellen overhears this and isn't very happy. She urges Brody not to go. She thinks it's too dangerous, but he brushes her off. Brody and Hooper board Quint's boat the next day. Ellen nervously bids him farewell from the dock. At sea, Quint voices his dislike of sharks and admits to hunting them for sport. Brody and Hooper think he's crazy, but later they learn his craziness is just the result of trauma he experienced during World War II. He was aboard the USS Indianapolis, a naval ship that was sunk by the Japanese. Stranded in the ocean, he was forced to watch many of his fellow crew members get devoured by sharks until a rescue team showed up days later. The men have several close encounters with the shark and almost capture him on a few occasions. Each encounter leaves the men more frustrated than the last. Quint begins drinking heavily and grows more aggressive. Tensions mount between Brody and Hooper as well. They end up having an argument that leads Hooper to confess to sleeping with Ellen. They fight and Brody almost throws him overboard. Quint has to break it up. Meanwhile, Ellen has become so anxious about Brody's safety, she's hopped on a boat and journeyed out to sea. She arrives at Quint's boat, shocking everyone on board. The men urge her to turn back and go home, but she refuses. She tells them she'll leave if Brody promises to leave too. The shark suddenly appears and kills her. Brody and Hooper are horrified. The shark returns and rams the boat hard. Quint is manic. He harpoons the shark, but it fails to do any significant harm to it. He whips the boat into high gear and chases it, blowing out the ship's engine in the process. Hooper suggests lowering himself inside the water in the shark cage, where he can poison it with a spear. Brody and Quint lower him in the water. After a few minutes of waiting, the shark appears. He tears his way through the cage and kills Hooper. Then it wrecks the boat further, leaping up onto the deck. The boat starts sinking. Brody runs into the cabin for safety. Quint does the opposite. He pulls out a hunting knife and charges at the shark. He leaps onto its head and stabs it multiple times, but the shark manages to free itself from his grasp and ultimately pulls him into the ocean to his death. Moments later, the shark comes back again for Brody. He throws an oxygen tank in its mouth and climbs the ship's mast with a rifle. He fires several shots at the shark until he hits the tank, blowing up the fish. Brody is left alone, floating in the water, wondering if he should swim back on his own or if he should wait until someone rescues him. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow my social media channels as well. You can find the links to all those in the description below. Also, don't forget to check out my blog at sinistersoulsentertainment.com, where you can find movie reviews, fiction reviews, and my screenwriting journal. Thank you for watching Terror Reimagined.